In 2001, I was a science student, computer science. So you can imagine I rarely left my basement. But someday I decided I would go to a software conference in Munich. And boy, did they have a lot of great speakers there and interesting people. But I was there for only one person. His name was Olli. And I had this amazing idea I needed him for. Ideas are important. Would you agree? Is it fair to assume that there are people in this room who have ideas so exciting and big, you might be scared to talk about them? If that's you, raise your hand. So everybody else, look. These people are your opportunity to meet someone who has these big ideas. So I remember sitting in that audience, pretty much like you guys here today. The air was smelling of stale coffee and ambition. And there he was, right in front of me, giving his speech on innovation. I was ready to grab him after his talk and land my idea. When he finished, he did something super surprising. He walked off stage and came right at me and joined this small circle of people I was standing with, killing my plan. So and then he sighed and said, you know, the irony is I just announced this huge innovation budget to my company, but my people don't share any ideas. They are playing it too safe. And then he looked around the circle and said, do you have any ideas what I should do with that budget? And locks onto me. And I'm like, I was instantly scared and frightened because I had the perfect idea, but who was I to educate Olli about the world? Right? I was scared, out of breath, heart pounding. I couldn't speak. Who of you has ever been there? You guys know exactly how I felt. So I pulled it together because I thought, hey, this opportunity is not coming back. And I left my home and traveled to Munich. So I decided to take a breath and speak. And I said this. Yeah, Olli, you know, we have to use the new web services platform to build an identity management. And then we can have a distributed database and asynchronous messaging. And we ship it to people in a container app. I know it's hard to imagine, but Olli just stared at me. And then he pulled himself together and he gave me a polite but very confused nod. And he said, interesting. I think I didn't understand that. Coffee, anyone? And he turned around, walked to the coffee bar, and he was gone. Now you could say, hey, Marcus, at least you tried. And I would say, yeah, I tried to scare random people into a flight reaction. That was fun too, but that is not what our ideas are for. You see, it doesn't matter if you want to land that dream job at an ocean revival AI company, if that exists, or collect that multi-million-dollar funding for your new startup, or if you want to convince your parents to finally fall in love with computer games. You probably can't do it hiding in your closet, can you? You need to convince other people. You need to influence. most part of my life, I thought influence is this rare talent given to only a select few. And I was none of them. I was totally wrong. Turns out, each and every one of us has the power to inspire other people and win them for their idea, for your ideas. You can do it in a single conversation, and that is instant influence. It only has 3 ingredients. You can learn all of them in the 13 minutes, roughly, we have left. If you want that, say, Cool, you never use it for evil though, right? So at 27, when I was building my first businesses, a few years later, I had messed up so many opportunities to introduce myself, like you just heard, same style. I stopped counting. I was tired of trying to talk people into my ideas, tired of putting my heart on a silver plate just for it to be stabbed and thrown into a trash can, tired of confused faces. So what do? I'm sitting in a comfy lounge chair in a beach club in Italy. The sun is setting, the vibe totally relaxed, the air smells of olive oil, and I'm starting to enjoy a welcome time off. And then, bump, someone runs into my chair. I turn around, and who do I see? Ollie. In a linen shirt, now with a spilled drink, totally off guard. He looks at me, starts smiling and says, "You here? I've seen you more on LinkedIn lately. You started something, right? What is it about?" He had completely forgotten. Can you believe that? Have you forgotten too, right? Web services? Database? No? So I had left my work brain at home. Lucky me. So I gave him the shortest, bluntest answer possible to get back to my well-deserved boredom. And surprisingly, his eyes lit up with curiosity, like 2 flamethrowers looking at me. He started asking questions, more and more questions. And 20 minutes later, he wanted to be a part of it all. That was one confusing moment for me. I had given him literally nothing. I didn't know what had happened. Which brings us to our first ingredient for instant influence. How do we get people to actually listen? You all know we live in a world where we may have 8 seconds or so to get someone's attention. And our future employers, investors, our future fans are not waiting to knock down our door just to talk to us. Is that right? We have to get them. And sometimes we have to give people an opportunity to become curious. And we do that by putting them on information diet and by speaking less. So that way, I didn't know any of that, by the way, but I managed to, instead of the long technoid monologue you heard earlier, I just said, "Ollie, you know, I can't stop wondering why all these tech companies get innovation all wrong." And so I managed to finally get him on the hook. Curiosity is that first ingredient for instant influence. And we know exactly where to look for inspiration, if that's your question. How do I do that? You know, you guys excluded. There are people somewhere on this planet who get completely lost in TikToks, Reels, or Shorts. I'm sure you've all seen that. Have you? Now, why is that? These guys are great at getting us hooked, at curiosity. So can we not just take a few of their opening hooks from those videos and put them into our conversation? If the software nerd can do it, you can do it too, right? So once we have their curiosity, how do we get them to care enough to actually be really interested in talking about our idea? Let's talk about the most powerful device ever given to mankind, sitting right between our ears. It's not the nose. The human brain. It's built of an extremely rational part and an emotional part, right? So that rational part loves data, arguments, facts. Have you ever had someone bombarding you with facts and you just hoped it would end? There's a good reason for that. That part of our brain is very lazy. The other, faster part of our brain lives on stories, images, and emotion. It doesn't have access to data, facts, or language, but it makes all of our decisions. And that's non-negotiable. Proven point, who here has ever made an important decision in their life they can't rationally explain to themselves anymore? Yeah, see? We all act like glorified lizards some of the time. Now, breaking news. The person we are trying to convince has that device too. So if we want to move people, we can't ignore that part of the brain. Can we? Now, in a conversation, that is way more accessible than most people think. Why? Yes, we can use story, image, emotion, and it works. But what are people most interested in? Themselves. What? Themselves, that's right. So, is it possible that it would work real wonders if we put them at the center of our conversation and just get them to talk? That's exactly what I was trying to find out. So I became a relentless student of the art and science of convincing people. I've worked with technology teams, software companies, the best in the world, and I watched them trying to convince their customers, trying to convince people of their ideas. And interestingly, most of them were boring. They were totally focused on themselves, and they blew it too. It was not just me. And then there were very few who actually pulled it off. They did a great job at winning people. And they had an interesting difference in their approach. They listened with fascination. They asked brilliant questions. And somehow it was magic to watch. These people they were talking to opened up within minutes to someone they didn't even know. And a lot of them convinced themselves. Wow, I wanted that too. And actually I observed, and maybe you did that too, it's quite similar to a doctor. If you visit a doctor's office with back pain, I know it's hard to imagine right now, but trust me, you will. They don't tell you to shut up and start their presentation, right? About their new brain surgery. They ask questions. So then they can give you exactly what you need, right? When I should meet Ollie again, boy, was I prepared. I had created a little framework. And out of respect for the doctors, I called it the undressing. Not the person, the issue. What were you thinking, Pradeep? So this is not about the exact questions you ask. It's about the conversation going deep enough so people can feel connected and they see how much you care and they feel understood. But of course, I have to use actual questions. So here are my 5. It's just 5. The first one is always about the motivation. Hey, Ollie, what has you have this conversation again? And then he tells me this innovation problem is still around and huge budget, no ideas, right? The second one is a reality check. So I'm asking him, Ollie, how does this show up today? And he tells me, yeah, we have 0 ideas moving, we have nothing we implement, we're stuck. The third question is about consequences. So I'm asking him, okay, Ollie, what are you afraid will happen if you don't solve this? Can you see how this is moving deeper? Hopes and fears. And he tells me, yeah, we will be doomed at some point, and I have hundreds of people that will be affected. The fourth question is about existing options and ideas. So I ask him, Ollie, okay, cool, I got it. What have you come up with? And he tells me some vague ideas. Of course. Why would he talk to me if they had it figured out already? He wouldn't. The fifth question is about necessary checks. And it goes like this. Okay, Ollie, just imagine I had an alternative. I'm not saying I have. What would it need to look like? And he tells me it needs to fit the budget, needs to be new and exciting, needs to be able to turn into a real business, which my idea was. Can you see how he tells me exactly what he needs to hear back from me? Isn't that exciting and interesting? That's how you really connect. And by the way, it's way easier than guessing and presenting to someone you know nothing about. That's the power of connection. So once we have the curiosity and we have the connection, how do we get them invested enough to actually act and make a decision? When we want to get people to make a decision, we need to revisit that emotional part of our brain one more time. Probably you have observed at some point that people don't always decide what's best for them. Like morning runs in the winter, dropping carbohydrates. They decide for what they fear least. What happens if I turn my idea into a 43-page manual is actually torture. So the only thing we need to do at this stage is remove the blocks that keep them from making a decision. It's actually easy. Only 3 things. We need to show them the value again by saying, for instance, hey, Ollie, this is what you want to achieve. Is that still correct? And he can say, still correct. The second thing we want to do is show them a clear path. Like, Ollie, cool, because there are only 6 steps we need to take, and others have done it already. The third thing we want to do is to remove uncertainty. For instance, by saying, Ollie, okay, cool, here's how we will make sure it actually works, and take out the risk. By doing only those 3, we give them the certainty they need to act. Like not the details, the certainty. And that's how I, after all these years, had finally and for the first time given Ollie a fair chance to invest in my idea. By shutting up, being empathetic, and acting like a human being. Does that make sense? Cool. So you see, I don't believe your ideas have been given to you to make you suffer in silence. They are clues to your true purpose. They are invitations to go beyond horizons. So whoever you pick to bring on board for your idea, if you decide to make them curious enough to care, if you decide to make them connected enough to actually listen, and if you decide to make them certain enough to act, you will be surprised how many people convince themselves and support your idea. And your life will overflow with opportunities. That's what I wish for all of you. Thank you very much.